A single white rose is carved where no stonecutter's tool should reach. This tiny, perfect symbol, hidden in the shadows of a forgotten chapel, is a message from the past. It is a signature left by one of history's most elusive enigmas, the secret order of the White Rose. For centuries, their name has surfaced only in fragments, a ghost in the archives, a conspiracy whispered across generations. They were knights who vanished, scholars who were silenced, guardians of a secret so dangerous it could rewrite everything we think we know about the medieval world. By the end of this journey, you will hold all the pieces of this ancient puzzle, seeing how a legend of heresy, science, and hidden power was woven into the very fabric of history. We will follow a trail of coded manuscripts and architectural clues to ask who these shadowy figures really were and what profound truth they died to protect. What does a simple flower have to do with the fate of empires? The earliest whispers of their existence appear not in royal decrees but in the margins of history. In a monastic chronicle from the year 1187, a Cistercian scribe copying a text on divine grace pauses to record a strange piece of gossip from the road. He writes of a fellowship he calls the Albati, the White Ones, men who wore no emblem but were known to aid those persecuted for what he terms unorthodox learning. The entry is brief, almost an afterthought, and ends with a prayer for their misguided souls. Around the same time, in the courts of southern France, troubadours sang ballads of veiled knights and a hidden garden where truth grew like a flower. These were not explicit records, but echoes, the first faint ripples of a stone dropped into a deep, dark well. The central myth that crystallizes from these fragments tells of a profound disillusionment. In the late 12th century, as crusades drained kingdoms and the gap between clerical wealth and peasant piety widened, a small circle of men reached a breaking point. They were, the stories say, a mix of battlefield knights who had seen too much holy blood spilled, and cloistered scholars who had read too many ancient texts forbidden by the church. United by a shared crisis of faith, not in God, but in the institutions that claimed to speak for him, they gathered in secret, under the cover of night, in a chapter house or a forest clearing now lost to time. They swore a binding oath. Their vow was not to a king or a pope, but to a higher principle, a dangerous secret they believed was being suppressed, or a heretical ideal of knowledge that belonged to all humanity, not just the ordained few. Their choice of symbol was a masterstroke of layered meaning. The white rose was no random emblem. In the language of medieval symbolism, the rose represented perfection and mystery, its folded petals hiding a sacred center. The color white stood for purity of purpose, an uncorrupted ideal. But there was a brilliant and likely intentional deception at work. Centuries later, the white rose would become the famous badge of the royal House of York during England's dynastic wars. This later, noisy political association created a perfect smokescreen. Any later investigator finding a vague reference to a white rose in an old document would naturally think of Yorkist plots, not a shadowy philosophical order from a much earlier age. It was a camouflage woven from history itself, allowing their true legend to hide in plain sight for generations. This choice of a white rose over any other symbol was a declaration written in a language only the initiated could fully read. In heraldry, white or argent symbolized peace, sincerity, and purity. A knight bearing a white rose on his shield would be declaring these virtues as his armor, a stark contrast to the lions and dragons of martial conquest. But the meaning runs deeper into the realms of alchemy and sacred poetry. In alchemical texts, the rose was often depicted at the center of a cross, a symbol of the perfected spirit blossoming from the crucible of earthly experience. Its white petals represented the final, purified stage of the great work, the achievement of enlightenment. Medieval poets, too, used the rose as a metaphor for divine love and unattainable truth, its beauty veiling a profound mystery at its heart. So when this order named themselves, they were not selecting a pretty flower. They were encoding their entire mission statement into a single, silent image, a commitment to a purity of knowledge and a spiritual perfection that existed outside the sanctioned walls of the church. The brilliant irony is how history provided them with the perfect disguise. Centuries after their founding, the Wars of the Roses would erupt in England, pitting the Red Rose of Lancaster against the White Rose of York. This very public, very bloody conflict forever tied the White Rose in the popular imagination to royal ambition and political power. Any later scholar stumbling upon a cryptic reference to a White Rose society would almost certainly dismiss it as a footnote to these 15th century dynastic squabbles. This raises a fascinating question. Was the order's name a fortunate coincidence that later shielded them? Or was it a stroke of deliberate genius, a way to bury their philosophical truth beneath a layer of distracting political noise? The echo of their symbol resonates even further into the early 17th century with the publication of the mysterious Rosicrucian manifestos. These documents spoke of a secret brotherhood of enlightened scholars, the Rosy Cross, who held ancient wisdom that could reform the world. The parallels are striking: a hidden order, a rose as a central symbol, a promise of transformative knowledge. So, did the White Rose inspire the Rosicrucian myth centuries later? Or did romantic occultists dreaming of a noble past retroactively craft the legend of the White Rose, grafting it onto older fragments to lend their own ideas historical weight? The truth is likely woven from both threads. The original order probably existed, their symbol carrying the weight we've described. And later seekers, yearning for that lost lineage of secret wisdom, saw in the scattered hints of the White Rose a perfect ancestor, and in retelling the story, they may have burnished the legend, adding layers of mystery that the original brothers might not even recognize. The White Rose, therefore, is not just their symbol. It is a mirror reflecting whatever light a later age chooses to shine upon it, hiding its true thorns in the soft glow of perpetual mystery. This very ambiguity is what makes the order so frustrating to the modern historian. We are left chasing whispers in the archives, a puzzle where the most important pieces seem to be missing by design. The primary source problem is absolute. There is no founding charter for the secret order of the White Rose, no membership roll, no grand manifesto discovered in a hidden vault. Instead, the evidence exists in the negative space of history, in the gaps and the glitches of the medieval record. It is found in the margins of manuscripts, where a bored or inspired scribe might doodle a tiny, intricate rose next to a passage discussing Plato's forms or the motion of the planets, a silent nod of recognition. It appears in the transcripts of inquisitorial trials, where an accused heretic, under immense pressure, might speak of a brotherhood of the pure heart or those who follow the white path. References so vague they could be a genuine clue or merely the desperate poetry of a condemned soul. These are third-hand accounts filtered through the fear of the accused and the doctrinal lens of the interrogator, making them treacherous ground for building a case. This scarcity of proof has sparked a fierce, ongoing debate among scholars. On one side are the substantialists. They argue that the sheer volume of these fragmented, geographically scattered references points to a real, though necessarily clandestine, organization. They see a pattern in the chaos, a consistency in the symbolism and the type of knowledge associated with it, from botanical studies in Spain to architectural anomalies in the Rhineland. To them, the absence of a smoking gun document is not proof of a phantom, but rather the expected result of a group that was supremely skilled at not leaving a paper trail, a group whose survival depended on staying in the shadows. On the other side are the skeptics who view the order as a historiographical phantom. They propose that later historians and romantic writers from the Renaissance onward have taken a handful of unrelated events, a few odd symbols, and a lot of wishful thinking, and stitched them together into a compelling but entirely fictional secret society. In this view, the White Rose is a classic example of a conspiracy of meaning, where the human desire for pattern and hidden truth creates a narrative where none existed. The lonely scribe's doodle was just a doodle, the heretic's poetic phrase was just a metaphor, and the rose carved in the chapel was the signature of a solitary, artistic stonemason, not a secret brotherhood. So, who is right? The answer may lie not in choosing a side, but in understanding the nature of the medieval world itself. In an era where unorthodox thought could mean imprisonment or worse, the line between a formal secret society and a loose network of like-minded individuals sharing dangerous ideas is incredibly blurry. The truth of the White Rose may be less a structured nightly order and more a persistent rumor of resistance, a name given by the fearful and the hopeful to an idea that refused to die, a spectral presence that haunted the corridors of power precisely because it could never be fully proven or fully erased. These elusive whispers and phantom documents inevitably lead us to the question of who exactly was whispering. If the order was real, who were its members? History offers no roster, but it does present us with a gallery of brilliant, radical figures whose lives and ideas cast long, suspicious shadows. By examining them, we can begin to sketch the profile of a potential White Rose brother, not to name names, but to understand the type of mind the legend attracts. One towering candidate is the English friar and philosopher Roger Bacon. In the 13th century, while most scholars were debating how many angels could dance on the head of a pin, Bacon was conducting experiments with optics, studying rainbows, and dreaming of flying machines and horseless carriages. He argued vehemently that the natural world should be investigated through observation and experiment, not just through ancient texts and scripture. To the church authorities of his day, this was dangerously close to heresy, an attempt to unlock God's secrets without God's permission. Bacon spent years under house arrest for his troublesome ideas. His entire life was a crusade for what he called scientia experimentalis, experimental science, a radical concept of knowledge gained through hands-on inquiry. Is it any wonder that later legend would place such a man at the heart of a secret society dedicated to preserving forbidden knowledge? His mindset, his defiance, and his persecution make him a perfect archetype for the order's supposed mission. Then there is the formidable Helena of Aquitaine, one of the most powerful women of the Middle Ages. As Queen of France and later England, her court in Poitiers became a legendary center of culture, a sanctuary for troubadours, poets, and thinkers who championed the ideals of courtly love and intellectual refinement. This culture often stood in subtle opposition to the more austere, martial values of the Church. Helena herself was a patron of these arts and a political operator of immense skill, who famously supported her sons in a rebellion against her own husband, King Henry II. While there is no direct evidence linking her to any secret order, her court represents exactly the kind of environment where unorthodox ideas could circulate under a veil of sophistication and art. If the White Rose needed a protector in high places, a patron who could shield dissent with the prestige of a royal court, Helena's world provides a compelling backdrop. The connection grows even more tantalizing when we look at the great heresies of the period, particularly the Cathars of southern France. The Cathar Perfecti, their spiritual leaders, preached a dualist belief that the material world was the creation of an evil god, and that the soul's purpose was to escape it through purity and knowledge. They lived simply, often worked as weavers, and were known for their deep study and debate. When the Church launched the brutal Albigensian crusade to eradicate them, many Perfecti went into hiding, taking their manuscripts and their radical theology with them. Could some of these scattered, persecuted scholars have found common cause with a broader network like the White Rose, bonding over a shared belief in a spiritual truth that the official church had corrupted? The same question applies to the Waldensians, another group who emphasized poverty, vernacular translation of the Bible, and a direct relationship with God, all challenges to clerical authority. These are not proven links but plausible intersections: a wandering Waldensian preacher, a hidden Cathar perfecti, a silenced scholar like Bacon, a powerful patron like Elena. These are the kinds of figures who, in the aggregate, give the legend of the White Rose its compelling shape. They represent the disparate threads of medieval dissent, threads that the myth weaves together into a single, stronger cord of secret resistance. But what did these shadowy figures actually believe? The order's true nature is a riddle with three possible answers, each more dangerous than the last in the medieval world. The first possibility paints them as guardians of a lost spiritual truth, a Gnostic Christian sect operating in the deepest shadows. Gnosticism, in its many forms, taught that salvation came not through faith or sacraments administered by a corrupt church, but through a secret knowledge, a gnosis, of the divine spark within each person. This was the ultimate heresy, as it made the individual's direct spiritual experience paramount and the institutional church unnecessary. If the White Rose was preserving forbidden gospels like those that spoke of a more mystical Christ, their mission was one of spiritual rebellion. We can see echoes of this in the actual heretical movements of the time, like the Brethren of the Free Spirit. These radicals, often wandering mystics, believed they could achieve such perfect union with God that they became morally infallible beyond sin. While extreme, their core idea that divine connection was personal and unmediated shares a family resemblance with the Gnostic ideal. A White Rose operating on this front wouldn't just be hiding books, they would be safeguarding a spiritual balm, the idea that heaven's gates could be unlocked from within. The second possibility is radically different, casting the order not as mystics but as the first scientists. This theory suggests they were a proto-scientific circle, a secret library network dedicated to preserving and advancing knowledge that the Church found threatening, especially the rediscovered works of ancient Greek and Arab thinkers. Imagine the works of Aristotle on logic and natural philosophy, the astronomical charts of Al-Batani, the medical texts of Avicenna, all translated and studied in secret. This knowledge, with its emphasis on reason and observation, directly challenged the theological framework that explained the world through scripture alone. A monk in a hidden scriptorium, meticulously copying a treatise on optics or human anatomy, knowing that discovery could mean charges of sorcery, would be a soldier in this quiet war for the future. Their White Rose, then, becomes a symbol of pure reason, a commitment to the light of inquiry in an age that often preferred the comfort of dogma. Their heresy was not against God, but against ignorance. The third possibility is perhaps the most subversive of all, that the White Rose was a nascent political movement. In an era of absolute power wielded by kings and popes, what if their secret was a blueprint for a different kind of society? Their creed might have advocated for limits on monarchical and papal authority, for the rule of law over the whim of a ruler, or for a concept of individual conscience. This would explain why they needed to be so utterly clandestine. Treason was a quicker path to the pyre than heresy. Their actions wouldn't focus on preserving texts, but on influencing minds in high places, planting seeds of reformist thought in the courts of sympathetic nobles or even disillusioned clergy. Their symbol, the White Rose of peace and sincerity, could then be read as a silent protest against the violent, corrupt politics of their time. They wouldn't be seeking to overthrow a king, but to quietly convince the powerful that a different, more just world was possible. So, were they heretics, scientists, or revolutionaries? The terrifying and fascinating answer is that they could have been all three at once. In the medieval mind, these spheres were not separate. Spiritual truth, natural philosophy, and the structure of society were all part of one divine order. To challenge one was to challenge them all. The order's ultimate secret may have been a holistic vision of a world remade, where enlightened knowledge guided both the soul and the state. A vision so profoundly dangerous it had to be whispered in the dark, its blueprint hidden in the geometry of a stone rose. Stone holds secrets longer than parchment ever could. To find the physical fingerprints of the White Rose, we must leave the archives and enter the silent, soaring spaces of medieval architecture itself. Two sites stand at the center of this mystery, each a masterpiece whispering a different tale. First, Rosslyn Chapel in Scotland, a place so dense with symbolism it has been called a book in stone. Built in the 15th century, its every surface is a riot of carved foliage, angels, and enigmatic figures. Among this stone tapestry, enthusiasts point to specific carvings, the famous apprentice pillar with its twisting vines and numerous delicate roses. The theory suggests these are not random decorations, but a complex coded library of White Rose knowledge, perhaps even a map to a hidden treasure or archive. The mainstream archaeological view offers a more grounded yet still fascinating explanation. Rosslyn was built by the Sinclair family, and its elaborate carvings are a breathtaking display of a master mason's skill and the patron's piety and wealth. The plants depicted, including corn and aloe vera, are seen by historians as reflections of the family's interests or trade connections, not cryptographic puzzles. The roses are part of a common medieval motif, the Rosa alba or white rose of the Virgin Mary, a standard symbol of purity in countless churches across Europe. The stonemason's marks, those small, simple symbols found on the backs of stones, are not secret codes, but the practical signatures of the craftsmen who shaped them, used for accounting their work. The Romantic theory sees a grand conspiracy etched in every detail, while scholarship sees the brilliant but conventional expression of a wealthy family's faith and status. Then there is Chartres Cathedral in France, a beacon of Gothic architecture. Here, the clues are not in explicit carvings, but in the building's very bones. Its labyrinthine floor pattern, its precise alignment, and the legendary association of its school with the study of Plato and Aristotle have led some to propose it as a center for the order's philosophical teachings. The cathedral's stunning stained glass, with its deep blues and complex iconography, is said to hold esoteric mathematical and astronomical knowledge. The established view acknowledges Chartres as a pinnacle of medieval learning and engineering. Its builders employed advanced geometry and optics, knowledge passed down through guilds of masons, not secret societies. The labyrinth was a site for devotional pilgrimage, a symbolic path to God one could walk on one's knees. The glass told biblical stories to an illiterate populace. The difference in interpretation is profound. One narrative sees hidden messages for the initiated, the other sees public theology and supreme craftsmanship made visible for all. This is the core of the architectural debate. When is a rose just a rose, and when is it a signature? Stonemasons had a vast symbolic vocabulary, from the compass and square representing their craft to the green man representing nature's cycle. A white rose among 100 other symbols was likely part of this shared visual language, not a clandestine signal. The alignment of a window to catch the solstice sun was a celebration of God's ordered creation, a public miracle of light, not a private astronomical chart. The haunting beauty of these places lies in their ability to hold both truths simultaneously. They are glorious achievements of their time, built by known methods for clear purposes. And yet, walking their aisles, one cannot shake the feeling that in the shadow of a carved rose, in the precise fall of light at a certain hour, something more personal, more secret, might also have been placed by a hand that believed in a different kind of light altogether. The stone does not give up its final answer, it only deepens the echo of the question. The silence of stone and parchment was shattered by the rising storm of the Inquisition. By the 13th century, the Church had declared total war on unorthodox thought, and a secret society holding any of the beliefs we have discussed would have found itself in the crosshairs of the most efficient persecution machine the medieval world had ever seen. Imagine the constant, grinding fear, the necessity of absolute trust where a single whispered confession, a careless word to the wrong neighbor, could lead a brother to the stake. This was not an era of polite debate. It was a life lived in the shadow of the interrogation chamber, where secrecy was not a romantic affectation but a matter of survival. To operate at all, the order would have needed a cell-like structure, small, isolated groups unaware of other cells, communicating through dead drops and coded messages hidden in plain sight, perhaps within the very illuminated manuscripts they sought to preserve. A meeting would not be a grand gathering in a castle hall, but a hushed conversation between two travelers on a lonely road, or a silent exchange of books in the back of a monastic scriptorium. Every member lived a double life, their public face one of perfect orthodoxy, while their private mind guarded a truth that could get them killed. Specific papal decrees cast a wide and terrifying net. The bull Ad Abolendum, issued in 1184, explicitly condemned all heretics and ordered secular rulers to hunt them down. Later, Pope Gregory IX established the Papal Inquisition in 1231, delegating the task to the newly formed Dominican order, men trained in theology and law, relentless in their pursuit of doctrinal purity. While no document names the White Rose directly, the Inquisition's targets fit its profile perfectly. They pursued the Cathars for their dualist beliefs, the Waldensians for their vernacular Bibles, the Brethren of the Free Spirit for their radical mysticism, and scholars like the Emelricians, who were accused of pantheistic ideas that blurred the line between God and creation. Any group blending spiritual heresy with a reverence for forbidden natural philosophy would have been a prime target. An inquisitor reading the works of a Roger Bacon with their talk of experimental science might easily see not just error, but a deliberate, prideful attempt to steal God's secrets, a crime far worse than simple ignorance. The atmosphere was one of suspicion so thick it choked the very air, where an unusual interest in the stars or a too deep knowledge of ancient Greek could be enough to attract a dangerous gaze. This relentless pressure leads to the pivotal question of the order's end. The common assumption is that they were found and destroyed, rounded up in a dramatic series of trials and executions. Yet history holds no record of such a trial, no mass burning of the Brotherhood of the White Rose. This absence is itself a clue. Perhaps they were not eradicated, but strategically dissolved. Facing an enemy they could not defeat, the remaining leadership might have made a heartbreaking, pragmatic decision. To protect the core of their knowledge, they could have ordered the Brotherhood to scatter, to bury their archives, and to erase all outward traces of their fellowship. Each member would become a solitary guardian, carrying a fragment of the truth into a life of permanent silence, the living library of a disbanded order. This theory of deliberate vanishing explains the lack of a smoking gun. The order simply melted back into the landscape of history, its members becoming anonymous priests, physicians, or minor nobles, their vows never broken but now carried alone. Another, even darker possibility is that they were not dissolved, but driven so deep underground that they effectively became ghosts. Their operations would have shrunk from an international network to a handful of families in remote regions, passing on their charge in absolute secrecy from parent to child, not as a vibrant society, but as a sacred, burdensome trust. Their symbols would no longer be carved in stone, but embroidered on hidden linens or drawn in the margins of family Bibles never shown to outsiders. In this state, the order would cease to be an active force and become a dormant one, a seed buried under centuries of frost, waiting for a time when the world might be less hostile to its growth. Their disappearance, then, is not proof of their fictional nature, but perhaps the ultimate testament to their skill. The greatest trick a secret society can perform is not to stage a dramatic reveal, but to vanish so completely that the world wonders if it ever existed at all, leaving behind only the faint, haunting scent of a white rose on the cold air of history. The scent of that white rose lingers not in stone alone, but on the brittle pages of books that were never meant to be read. While architecture whispers, manuscripts can scream in a language no one understands. The most tantalizing clues to the order's existence lie in the legend of encrypted texts. documents written in a code so clever their secrets have remained locked for centuries. Foremost among these phantom books is the Liber Albus Rossi, the Book of the White Rose. No library in the world claims to hold it, no auction house has ever sold it. It exists only in references within other obscure texts, described as a compendium of forbidden knowledge, from alchemical formulas to heretical gospels to blueprints for unknown machines. It is the holy grail of this mystery, a volume that promises to explain everything if only one could find it and then crack its code. To understand how such a book could remain hidden, we must step into the mind of a medieval scribe tasked with protecting dangerous truths. The ciphers of the time were elegant in their simplicity, yet formidable to the untrained eye. The most basic was the Caesar cipher, where each letter in the alphabet is shifted a fixed number of places. Writing Rosa with a shift of 3 becomes Irved. A step more complex was the monoalphabetic substitution cipher, where each plaintext letter is mapped to a different, random ciphertext letter, creating a unique key that both the sender and receiver must possess. But the truly cunning might employ a null cipher, where the true message is hidden within the first letter of every word in an otherwise boring letter about the weather, or a book cipher, where numbers refer to specific words on specific pages of an agreed-upon text, like a Bible or a common prayer book. To break such a code without the key, a modern analyst would look for patterns. They would count letter frequencies, knowing that in English, E and T are the most common, and search for repeating groups of letters that might stand for common words like the Oran. They would examine the manuscript for odd spacing, unusual ink, or microscopic pinpricks above certain letters. It is a painstaking dance of logic and intuition, a battle of wits across 800 years. This is not just theoretical, for we have a real, breathtaking example that haunts codebreakers to this day, the Voynich manuscript. Discovered in the early 20th century, this illustrated book from the 15th century is written entirely in an unknown script, accompanied by bizarre drawings of unidentifiable plants, celestial charts, and nude women bathing in strange green tubes. Its alphabet defies classification, and despite the efforts of military cryptographers and artificial intelligence, it remains undeciphered. Its very existence is a siren song for conspiracy theorists, and many have tried to link it to the White Rose legend. Could the Voynich be the lost Liber Albus Rossi itself, or a sister text from the same clandestine network? The timing is plausible, the aura of mystery is perfect. Yet mainstream scholars point to more mundane, though still fascinating, possibilities, that it is an encoded herbal manual, a treatise on natural magic, or an elaborate hoax. The frustrating, beautiful truth of the Voynich is that it proves such texts could and did exist. Someone went to extraordinary lengths to create a book no one else could read. Whether its author was a lone genius, a member of a secret guild, or a trickster, the manuscript stands as a monument to the medieval desire to conceal knowledge. It is a physical echo of the paranoia and passion that would have surrounded any true White Rose archive. So the search continues, not just for a single book, but for a way of thinking, for the ghost of a system that believed some truths were too potent, too beautiful, or too dangerous to be written in the open air. Each undeciphered page in the world is a silent challenge, a locked door behind which just maybe a white rose is waiting to bloom. This later, noisy association of the white rose with royal power is not just a historical coincidence, it is a clue that demands investigation. When the House of York adopted the white rose as its badge in the 15th century, plunging England into the dynastic bloodshed of the Wars of the Roses, were they merely selecting a pretty heraldic symbol, or were they tapping into something much older and more potent? The theory is as audacious as it is compelling that key Yorkist leaders, particularly Richard, Duke of York, and his son, King Edward IV, were not just politicians, but intellectuals who knew the legend of the secret order and sought to harness its mystique for their own claim to the throne. Richard, Duke of York, was a complex figure, a man of considerable learning and administrative skill who believed passionately in his legitimate right to rule. His opposition to the weak and unpopular King Henry VI was framed as a crusade for good governance and the proper, lawful order of things. To his supporters, this was not mere ambition, it was a righteous cause. Could the symbolism of the white rose, with its ancient connotations of purity, lawful purpose, and hidden truth, have been a deliberate signal to those in the know? By adopting this emblem, the Yorkist cause could be subtly painted not as a grab for power, but as the restoration of a purer, more legitimate form of kingship, a return to a mythical, uncorrupted past. This connection deepens dramatically with the rise of his son, Edward IV. Edward was a charismatic and formidable king, but he also presided over a court renowned for its cultural sophistication, its interest in chivalric romance, and its patronage of new learning. His personal symbol, famously combined with the white rose, was the sun in splendor, a radiant golden sun with rays and a human face. Heraldically, this represented the dawn of a new era, the glorious sunrise of Yorkist rule following the dark night of Lancastrian misrule. But to a mind attuned to esoteric traditions, the sun in splendor carries far heavier symbolic weight. In alchemy, the sun represents gold, perfection, and the culmination of the great work. In mystical thought, it is the divine light of illumination, the source of all life and knowledge. Edward's use of this symbol, often shown emerging from behind clouds, could be read as a bold, almost heretical statement that his kingship was not just politically legitimate, but divinely enlightened, a manifestation of a higher order on earth. Was this simply brilliant propaganda, or was it the public hint of a private belief system? The evidence is, as always, circumstantial but haunting. The Yorkist period saw a notable flourishing of interest in astronomy, geometry, and architecture. There are curious architectural details in buildings associated with Yorkist sympathizers that echo older, esoteric motifs. The problem for historians is separating genuine cultural revival from political theater. A king like Edward IV was a master of image-making. He would have understood the power of layering his claim with every possible symbol of legitimacy, from heraldic right to a near-messianic aura. Adopting the white rose and pairing it with the radiant sun could have been a calculated move to appeal to any underground currents of thought that valued those symbols, offering a silent promise of protection or patronage in exchange for support. It creates a fascinating possibility that the medieval order's symbol was co-opted and revived not for its original secret purpose, but as a brilliant piece of political branding, its ancient mystery repurposed to sanctify a very modern throne. Yet the question lingers, what if the influence flowed both ways? What if, in the libraries and private chambers of Yorkist castles, the old manuscripts were indeed being read, and the old ideal of a kingdom guided by enlightened knowledge found a new, powerful audience? The white rose of York, stained by the blood of battlefields like Towton and Bosworth, may have been the very thing that kept the older, quieter rose from being forgotten forever, its thorns now part of a crown. Gold was never the only treasure sought in the alchemist's fire. For those who saw the world as a grand, living symbol, the true goal of alchemy was the transmutation of the soul itself, and here we find the white rose blooming in the heart of the furnace. The order's emblem aligns perfectly with one of the most sacred stages of the alchemical journey, known as the albedo, or the whitening. After the initial blackening, the negrido, which represented death, decay, and the dissolution of the old self, the albedo was the dawn, the washing pure, the moment when the base material began to shine with a silvery, lunar light. It was a symbol of purification, of hope, of the spirit rising cleansed from the ashes of its former ignorance. A white rose emerging from a blackened crucible would be a perfect, silent emblem of this profound spiritual ascent. So, if the order was steeped in this tradition, their quest shifts dramatically. Were they hunting for a literal chunk of the philosopher's stone that could turn lead into gold and grant eternal life? Possibly, but that seems a crude ambition for a brotherhood allegedly guarding higher truths. The more compelling idea is that the stone was a metaphor for them, a symbol of the ultimate, perfected knowledge that could transform anything it touched. In one sense, that knowledge was spiritual enlightenment, the gnosis that turns the leaden, sinful soul into the golden, divine spirit. In another, more dangerous sense, the stone could represent a transformative social principle, a secret blueprint for a just society that, if applied, could transmute the base metal of a corrupt world into a golden age of peace and wisdom. Their hidden work, then, wasn't just in laboratories, but in the quiet shaping of minds and institutions, attempting a different kind of magic altogether. We can see this layered meaning in actual alchemical texts that permeated medieval libraries. In the seminal Rosarium Philosophorum, the Rosary of the Philosophers, the rose is not a minor decoration, it is the central image. The text describes the union of opposites, the king and queen, the sun and moon, as taking place within a rose garden. The final, triumphant image is often the Rebis, the perfected hermaphroditic being, standing upon a dragon and holding a single, blooming rose. Another text, the Splendor Solis, is illuminated with stunning paintings where roses grow from vessels of transformation. These were not instruction manuals for getting rich. They were spiritual roadmaps, using the rose as a guidepost on the path to inner unity. For a secret order adopting this symbol, every meeting, every copied manuscript, every act of preservation could be seen as an alchemical operation. The slow, patient work of gathering fragments of forbidden knowledge was their negrido, the dark and dangerous first step. The careful study and debate to separate truth from dogma was their albedo, the purification. And the ultimate goal, the guarded secret at the heart of their brotherhood, was their own elusive rubido, the reddening, the final stage of consummated power and spiritual fire. Their white rose, then, was not a static badge, but a living promise, a declaration that they were in the middle of the great work, forever striving toward that impossible, radiant dawn where matter and spirit, knowledge and power would finally become one. Their network, if it existed, would have required safe havens, places where dangerous ideas could circulate in the fertile shadows of official culture. Tracing the ghostly geography of the White Rose leads us on a journey across a medieval Europe not of kingdoms but of minds, connecting regions simmering with dissent. The first and most obvious sanctuary would have been the sun-drenched hills of Languedoc in what is now southern France. This was Cathar country, a land where a different Christianity had taken deep root. In the decades before the brutal Albigensian crusade erased it, the region was a remarkable anomaly, known for its tolerance, its prosperous towns, and its courtly culture. Troubadours sang poems that often blurred the lines between earthly and divine love, and the Cathar perfecti debated theology openly. For a secret order, this environment would have been a perfect recruiting ground and a place to exchange radical spiritual ideas under the cover of a broader heretical movement. The Crusade's violence, beginning in 1209, didn't just kill people, it scattered knowledge. Fleeing perfecti and sympathetic nobles, carrying their beliefs and their books, would have become nodes in a desperate, hidden network, their paths creating invisible lines across the map. A very different kind of hub would have been the bustling, intellectual warren of the University of Paris. By the 13th century, it was the undisputed center of theological learning in Latin Christendom. Here, in the crowded lecture halls and smoky taverns along the left bank, the great debates of the age were fought with words and logic. This was the arena of thinkers like Thomas Aquinas, who sought to reconcile faith with the newly rediscovered philosophy of Aristotle. But for every Aquinas building a grand cathedral of thought, there were others asking more dangerous questions. Masters and students debated the limits of papal power, the nature of the soul, and the mechanics of the cosmos. A secret cell operating here wouldn't be hiding in a forest, but in plain sight, wearing the robes of a scholar. a whispered conversation after a lecture on natural philosophy, a borrowed book with curious annotations passed in a cloister. These were the currencies of this shadow world. Paris offered the perfect camouflage, the noise and chaos of academic debate masking the quieter, more radical exchanges happening just beneath the surface. From the scholastic intensity of Paris, our map leads east to the misty river valleys of the Rhineland. This region was the heartland of medieval mysticism, home to figures like Meister Eckhart and Hildegard of Bingen, who spoke of a direct, experiential union with the divine that often made church authorities uneasy. The geography itself fostered isolation and introspection, with dense forests and secluded monasteries providing ideal conditions for contemplative, unconventional thought. Here, the White Rose legend often intersects with tales of the Grail and hidden communities of enlightened knights. It was also a major center for the craft guilds, particularly the stonemasons who built the great Gothic cathedrals. The practical, hands-on knowledge of geometry, engineering, and sacred geometry possessed by these master craftsmen was a form of potent, non-clerical wisdom. If the order valued a blend of spiritual insight and practical knowledge, the Rhineland's mix of mystical fervor and artisan skill would have been a magnetic center, a place where the blueprint for a cathedral and the blueprint for the soul might be drawn with the same compass. Finally, the trail leads to the glittering, chaotic court of Emperor Rudolf II in Prague, centuries later in the late 1500s. Rudolf was the archetype of the occult emperor, a man less interested in governing than in collecting marvels. He turned Prague Castle into a cabinet of curiosities on a royal scale, employing astronomers like Tycho Brahe and Johannes Kepler, and summoning alchemists, magicians, and artists from across Europe. His court was a sanctuary for every kind of esoteric and proto-scientific pursuit. For the legend of the White Rose, Rudolf's Prague represents a tantalizing possibility, a renaissance of the order's ideals under imperial protection. Was the emperor merely an eccentric collector, or was he consciously attempting to revive a hidden tradition, gathering the scattered heirs of a secret lineage to his court? The city became a grand crossroads where the mystical East met the scholarly West, where mathematics blended with magic, and where the quest for the philosopher's stone was funded by the Habsburg treasury. If the Brotherhood had survived in fragments, this would have been the moment and the place for a final, brilliant gathering, a last attempt to bring the secret knowledge into the light under the wing of a sympathetic crown. From the Cathar strongholds to the Parisian lecture halls, from the Rhineland forests to the alchemical workshops of Prague, this imagined map paints a picture of a resilience built not on castles, but on connections, a web of thought that no single crusade or inquisition could ever fully burn away. This single, overpowering mission could have defined their entire existence. The most persistent legend surrounding the White Rose is not that they were philosophers or mystics, but guardians, sworn to protect a single, earth-shattering secret. This is the Guardian hypothesis, a narrative that gives their shadowy activities a clear and compelling purpose. If they were keepers of a specific relic or truth, it would explain their obsessive secrecy, their cell-like structure, and their willingness to vanish rather than be captured. But what exactly were they guarding? The possibilities are as varied as they are profound, each painting a different portrait of the Order's ultimate loyalty. The first candidate is material and immense, the lost treasure of the Knights Templar. When that powerful military order was brutally suppressed in the early 1300s, rumors swirled that their vast wealth, accumulated from centuries of banking and donations, had been smuggled away before the arrests. Could a splinter group of Templars or sympathetic nobles have formed a new, even more secretive brotherhood to protect that hoard? The White Rose, in this scenario, becomes a silent bank, its members not spending the treasure, but preserving it as a sacred trust, perhaps for a future holy war or a moment of great need. Their white emblem would then symbolize the purity of their custodianship, a vow to guard without corruption, A second, more mystical possibility is the Holy Grail itself, though not necessarily a golden chalice. In some medieval romances, the Grail is not an object but a state of grace or a bloodline, the sangreal or royal blood, protecting a living lineage. A direct descendant of Christ or an ancient royal house would be a mission requiring absolute discretion across generations. The order would become a family of sworn protectors, weaving themselves into the fabric of society as doctors, lawyers, and tutors, always watching over their charge from the shadows. Their rose, a symbol of divine love and purity, would be a fitting emblem for guardians of such a sacred mystery. A third candidate is more orthodox but no less potent, a fragment of the true cross or another passion relic of unparalleled sanctity. In an age where such objects wielded immense spiritual and political power, possessing the most revered relic of all would be a blessing and a curse. It would grant the keepers immense spiritual authority, but also make them a target for every king and pope in Christendom. The order's task would be to hide it from those who would use it for temporal power, preserving it in a state of pure veneration. Their secrecy would be a form of worship, protecting the sacred from the profane world. Finally, the secret could be prophetic, a scroll or book containing an apocalyptic revelation, a calculation of the end of days, or a vision of a coming transformation. Guarding such knowledge would be a terrifying burden. Revealing it could cause panic or be misused by fanatics, but destroying it would be a sin against destiny. The brothers would become archivists of the future, studying the prophecy in secret to understand their own role in it, waiting for the signs that the time had come to act or to speak. Each of these missions would fundamentally shape the order. Guarding a physical treasure like Templar gold would require logistical genius, hidden vaults, and complex codes to access them. Protecting a bloodline would demand deep integration into noble courts and a seamless ability to appear ordinary. Safeguarding a world-altering prophecy would necessitate profound theological study and a discipline of silence to avoid premature revelation. In every case, the need for absolute, uncompromising secrecy becomes the bedrock of their existence. It would dictate a structure where no single member knew everything, where loyalty was tested not in battle but in a lifetime of quiet discretion, and where the greatest honor was to die without ever revealing the secret you had spent your life protecting. This hypothesis answers the most haunting question about them. Why endure such risk for so long? For a philosopher, an idea can be debated. For a guardian, the secret is everything, a sacred flame that must not be allowed to flicker out, even if it means the keepers themselves must fade into the darkness, leaving only the faint, enduring scent of their promise behind. That burden of secrecy might have buried the truth forever, if not for a sudden and dramatic resurrection centuries later. The legend of the White Rose did not fade with the medieval world. It was reborn, transfigured, in the fevered imagination of the Romantic era. By the 18th and 19th centuries, Europe was in the throes of a profound shift. The cold rationality of the Enlightenment had cleared away old superstitions, but in doing so, it left a spiritual and emotional void. Writers and artists began to rebel, turning away from logic in order to champion feeling, mystery, and the sublime power of the past. In this atmosphere, the dusty fragments of medieval mystery were not just history, they were fuel for a new kind of fire. Gothic novelists seeking to terrify and enthrall their readers found perfect material in the idea of a secret order persisting through the ages. A writer like Edward Bulwer-Lytton, in his novel Zanoni, published in 1842, did not simply mention the White Rose, he built an entire philosophy around it. His story features a centuries-old adept, a member of a hidden brotherhood guarding the secret of immortal life, who must choose between his supernatural power and human love. Bulwer-Lytton wove together threads of Rosicrucian legend, alchemical symbolism, and his own aristocratic politics to create a potent myth. In his hands, the order was no longer a persecuted medieval cell, but a timeless, superhuman elite, a concept that deeply appealed to a society fascinated by hidden hierarchies and ancient wisdom. This literary reinvention was matched by a rising tide of practical occultism. The most influential figure here was the French ceremonial magician Eliphas Lévy. Born Alphonse Louis Constant, Lévy was a former seminarian who dedicated his life to synthesizing a universal magical doctrine from Kabbalah, tarot, alchemy, and Christian mysticism. In his seminal works like Dogma and Ritual of High Magic, he frequently referenced a secret tradition of initiates that stretched back to antiquity. While he may not have named the White Rose directly, he provided the entire symbolic and philosophical toolkit that later groups would use to claim its lineage. Lévy taught that symbols like the rose and the cross were keys to spiritual power, and that a hidden brotherhood had always guarded these keys. His writings essentially provided the missing manual for the legend, transforming it from a historical rumor into a living, magical system waiting to be rediscovered. This cultural ferment culminated in the founding of actual secret societies, most notably the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn in late Victorian England. The Golden Dawn was not a medieval relic, but a brand new organization created in 1888 by a group of Freemasons and occult enthusiasts. Yet its genius was in its claim of ancient authority. Its founders produced a mysterious cipher manuscript, supposedly of great antiquity, which they said granted them a link to a hidden order of continental adepts. They built an elaborate hierarchy of grades, rituals, and knowledge, drawing heavily on Lévy's works on Kabbalah and on the very legends of Rosicrucian and chivalric orders that had absorbed the White Rose myth. Members like William Butler Yeats and Arthur Machen were not just playing at magic, they were sincerely attempting to contact higher spiritual planes and unlock personal transformation. For them, the White Rose was no longer a subject for historical research. It was an archetype, a spiritual reality one could aspire to join through ritual and study. The Golden Dawn and its offshoots permanently altered the legend's DNA. They blended the medieval framework with Egyptian mythology, Eastern philosophy, and modern psychology. The White Rose was no longer specifically about challenging the medieval church. It became a symbol of the perennial philosophy, the idea that a single, secret truth underlies all the world's religions and esoteric traditions, accessible only to those who undergo rigorous initiation. This romantic and occult revival did something crucial. It ensured the legend's survival into the modern age. The historical order, if it existed, was a response to a specific medieval crisis. The Romantic Order was a response to a modern one, the crisis of faith in a disenchanted, industrial world. Writers and magicians took the old, sparse clues and embroidered them with gold thread, creating a tapestry so rich and compelling that it became impossible to separate the original stitch from the glorious, elaborate restoration. We stopped looking for a historical brotherhood and began searching for a mystical one, a shift that would echo powerfully into the chaos of the 20th century. The romantic dream of a secret lineage did not vanish with the gaslights of the Victorian era. It hardened instead into the steel and paranoia of the 20th century, where the legend of the White Rose was forged into new and dangerous shapes. In the shadow of two world wars and the rise of mass media, the order was no longer just a subject for occultists and novelists. It became a central character in sprawling modern conspiracy theories. Most famously, it was grafted onto the myth of the Priory of Sion, a fictitious secret society fabricated in the 1950s by French monarchist Pierre Plantard. Plantard's elaborate hoax claimed the priory was a real order founded in the 11th century, tasked with guarding the secret of the Merovingian bloodline, descendants of Jesus Christ. To lend his invention historical weight, Plantard produced a list of supposed Grand Masters, which included names like Leonardo da Vinci, Isaac Newton, and Victor Hugo. While the White Rose was not explicitly named, the template was identical, a clandestine brotherhood protecting a world-altering secret about a sacred bloodline across centuries. This fiction, popularized by the 1982 book Holy Blood, Holy Grail, and later Dan Brown's The Da Vinci Code, created a cultural tidal wave. It presented a seductive, simplified narrative where all of history's mysteries were connected by a single, villainous or heroic secret society. In this new framework, the nuanced, scholarly mystery of the medieval White Rose was often absorbed, its distinct identity blurred into a generic catch-all for any hidden hand guiding history, often conflated with the Bavarian Illuminati or other supposed puppet masters. This shift from historical speculation to pop culture conspiracy had a profound effect. It transformed the Order from a subject of academic "what if" into a pillar of a paranoid "what is," suggesting not just that they existed, but that they were still pulling strings today, controlling finance, politics, and religion from a hidden chamber. The complex, ambiguous evidence was replaced by a satisfying but fictional certainty. This cultural repackaging reached every corner of entertainment. Umberto Eco's magnificent novel The Name of the Rose, published in 1980, is a masterclass in weaving real medieval scholarship with mystery. While it focuses on a Benedictine monastery and a lost Aristotle manuscript, its entire atmosphere is one of knowledge as a deadly, contested secret. The labyrinthine library, the deadly struggle over a forbidden book about laughter, it all channels the very intellectual tensions the White Rose legend springs from, presenting the medieval world as a place where ideas were worth killing for and dying for. In video games, the template became interactive. The Assassin's Creed franchise, beginning in 2007, built its entire universe on a millennia-old secret war between the Assassin Brotherhood and the Templar Order. While using the historical Templars as villains, the games constantly feature other shadowy factions, like the Instruments of the First Will or the Hidden Ones, who operate in the background, preserving ancient technology and knowledge. Players literally step into the boots of a secret guardian, navigating historical settings to uncover a truth that could reshape the world. This interactive form makes the conspiracy feel personal and immediate, embedding the core fantasy of the White Rose, being a lone keeper of a monumental truth, directly into the player's experience. These depictions are not history, but they are incredibly powerful myth-making. They influence public understanding by providing a vivid, emotional shortcut. For many, their first and only encounter with the idea of a medieval secret society will be through a movie like The Da Vinci Code or a session of Assassin's Creed. The danger is that the messy, ambiguous, and historically grounded mystery gets replaced by a sleek, exciting, but ultimately hollow adventure plot. The real White Rose, if it existed, was likely a story of quiet, terrified scribes and subtle philosophical resistance, not of globe-trotting professors solving anagrams or parkering across cathedral rooftops. Yet, these pop culture echoes serve a vital function. They keep the symbol alive in the collective imagination. They remind us that the human desire for hidden patterns and deeper truths is timeless. Every time a game player uncovers a virtual secret or a moviegoer is thrilled by a hidden code, they are participating in a very old story, one that began with a single white rose carved in a shadowy stone wall. The legend persists not because we have found the answers, but because we are still captivated by the questions. The most chilling evidence often comes not from what is found, but from what is missing. In the final decade of the 12th century, within the hallowed walls of the great Abbey of Cluny, a monk named Gerbert vanished without a trace. He was not a novice, but a senior librarian, a man entrusted with the very soul of the monastery, its collection of manuscripts. His disappearance was noted in the Abbey's chronicle with a single, stark line, "A void where a life had been." But the silence in the official record was filled by a roar of rumor that spread along the pilgrim roads and into the taverns of distant towns. The story, as it was whispered, claimed that Brother Gerbert did not leave alone. He was said to have taken with him 3 specific texts from the deepest recess of the cloistered library. The first was a crumbling copy of Plato's Timaeus, a dialogue on the creation of the cosmos that raised troubling questions about the nature of the soul. The second was an Arabic treatise on optics, translated in secret, which detailed experiments with lenses and light that seemed to probe the very mechanics of God's creation. The third was a small, unbound collection of Gnostic prayers, a text so heretical its very existence within Cluny was an unspeakable scandal. According to the whispers, Gerbert's cell was found orderly, his bed made, but these 3 volumes were gone from their assigned places on the shelf, the gaps like missing teeth in a sacred smile. The abbot ordered a discreet search, but no sign of the monk or the books was found within 100 miles of Cluny. The official conclusion was that he had succumbed to a crisis of faith, perhaps drowning himself in a river in a fit of despair, the books lost with him. The case was closed and his name was quietly removed from the daily prayers for the brethren. Yet years later, a merchant from the bustling Italian city of Bologna told a curious story to a traveling friar. He swore that while conducting business at the nascent university there, he had seen a man of remarkable learning, a lay scholar who advised students on geometry and philosophy. This scholar, who went by the name of Albinus, bore a striking resemblance to the missing monk, down to a distinctive scar above his right eyebrow, earned, it was said, from a falling candle sconce in the Cluny scriptorium. The merchant, once a lay brother at Cluny himself, approached the man and uttered Gerbert's name in greeting. The scholar's face, the merchant reported, showed not confusion, but a moment of profound and terrified recognition before he turned and melted into the crowded street, never to be seen in Bologna again. This tale, whether fact or folklore, is a perfect blueprint for the methods ascribed to the White Rose. The target was not gold or a relic, but knowledge itself, the dangerous, catalytic ideas contained in those 3 books. The operation required an insider, a man already in a position of trust with access to the forbidden archive. His disappearance was not a panicked flight, but a meticulously planned extraction, leaving no trail. His new identity already prepared in a distant city where a growing university provided the perfect camouflage for a learned man. His mission was not to hide, but to transplant, to take the sealed knowledge from the monastery's stagnant vault and replant it in the fertile, chaotic soil of a new intellectual center where it could grow and spread. The White Rose, in this light, was not a static library but a living network of scribes and smugglers, a silent river diverting the streams of forbidden thought around the dams of orthodoxy, ensuring that the dangerous questions of one generation became the foundational texts of the next. Gerbert, or Albinus, was not a faithless thief, but a willing ghost, a man who erased his own past to become a custodian for the future. His only lasting signature, the empty space on a library shelf and a story that refused to die. A secret cannot survive on faith alone, it needs coin. For the White Rose to persist across generations, whispering in the shadows and moving forbidden texts across continents, they required a silent river of wealth, a financial network as discreet and resilient as their philosophy. How does a phantom pay for its ink, its travel, its safe houses, and its silence? The answer lies not in magic, but in the gritty realities of medieval economics, where money was power and secrecy was a currency all its own. The most plausible source was a web of sympathetic merchant families. Think of the great trading houses that began to rise in the 13th and 14th centuries, families whose fortunes were built on wool, silk, spices, and banking. These were pragmatic men, often at odds with the old feudal and clerical powers that restricted their growth. A merchant in Florence or Bruges, educated and worldly, might find the order's ideas on knowledge and individual conscience not heretical but sensible. In return for discreet financial support, channeled through complex ledgers and false invoices for goods never delivered, the order could offer something invaluable: connections. Their network of scholars and travelers could provide intelligence on distant markets, translate foreign trade documents, or even recommend skilled artisans for a patron's projects. It was a symbiotic relationship, the merchant's gold funding the Brotherhood's survival, the Brotherhood's intellect enhancing the merchant's reach, all hidden within the ordinary noise of commerce. Alongside these mercantile allies, there would have been discreet patronage from the high nobility. Not every lord was a brutish warrior, many were deeply learned men, collectors of books and patrons of the arts who chafed under the church's intellectual monopoly. A duke with a private library of unusual texts or a countess who hosted salons for poets and thinkers could easily serve as a protector. Their support would not be a salary but a form of indirect patronage. They might endow a chantry priest position at a remote chapel, a sinecure that provided a living for a scholar brother who then had the freedom to study and write. They could offer a brother the post of court physician or librarian, a role that granted access, influence, and a cloak of impeccable respectability. In an age where noble households were small kingdoms unto themselves, sheltering a few unconventional minds was simple, and questioning a duke's choice of personal staff was unwise. This brings us to the most tantalizing possibility, the self-funding secret. If the order was indeed the guardian of a physical treasure, like the fabled Templar hoard, then their financial network becomes an exercise in supreme restraint. They would not be spenders but conservators. The treasure would not be a chest of gold to be used but a capital reserve to be managed. Imagine a small, trusted circle within the order, perhaps brothers who had been merchants in their former lives, tasked with investing portions of this wealth quietly. Through intermediaries, they could buy shares in a Venetian galley voyage, acquire income-producing farmland through a third party, or lend money at interest in a distant city where they were unknown. The returns would be funneled back into the order's operational costs, while the principal remained untouched, growing slowly across the centuries. This would create a perfect closed loop, the secret funding the protection of the secret itself. But money leaves traces, even hidden money. The genius of such a system would be in its fragmentation and mimicry, a donation recorded in a merchant's ledger as alms for the poor, a payment from a noble's treasury listed as a fee for architectural consultation on a new castle wing, a land purchase in a remote valley attributed to a minor monastic order. Each transaction on its own was utterly mundane, a single drop in the vast ocean of medieval finance. Only when viewed together by someone who knew what to look for might a pattern emerge, a faint, glittering constellation of financial support pointing to a presence that officially did not exist. Their greatest economic achievement, therefore, would not be amassing wealth, but rendering it invisible, weaving their gold so perfectly into the fabric of everyday life that it became just another thread holding the tapestry together from behind. Gold funds the body, but ritual forges the soul. To transform a loose network of thinkers into an unbreakable brotherhood, the order would have required ceremonies as potent as their secret, rites designed to rewrite a man's identity in a single, terrifying night. We can reconstruct the shadow of such a ritual by looking at the practices that surrounded them. Medieval guilds, for instance, had elaborate initiation rites for new masters, often involving symbolic tools and oaths of quality and fellowship. Monastic orders conducted a ceremony of profession where a novice, after a long period of testing, would lie prostrate before the altar in a symbolic death to the world, then rise to receive the habit of his new life. Later fraternal societies, like the Freemasons, would build upon these templates with staged journeys through darkness into light. The White Rose ceremony would have distilled these elements into something uniquely their own, a physical poem of their dangerous purpose. Picture a candidate, a scholar or a knight who has been observed for years, his loyalty and discretion tested in 100 subtle ways. On the appointed night, he is led, blindfolded, to a location he will never be permitted to identify. The blindfold serves a dual purpose. It protects the secrecy of the meeting place, and it plunges him into a state of sensory deprivation, where every sound and smell becomes amplified, his rational mind subdued, his primal awareness heightened. He might hear the rustle of robes, the faint scent of old stone and beeswax candles, the distant echo of a single note sung in plainchant. He is guided through a series of turns, disorienting him completely, a symbolic representation of the labyrinth of ignorance he is about to leave behind. Finally, he is made to kneel. The blindfold is not removed. A voice, calm and ancient, asks a series of questions, not about his lineage or his wealth, but about his deepest convictions. Would he defend a truth, even if the whole world called it a lie? Would he guard a secret, even from those he loves most? Would he choose the purity of knowledge over the comfort of dogma? His answers must be given without hesitation. Then comes the oath, the moment that seals his old life shut. His hand is guided to rest upon a cool, smooth object. It is not a Bible, but a single, perfect white rose, its petals perhaps made of alabaster or carved from ivory, resting upon a velvet cushion. The physical touch of the symbol imprints the vow upon his senses. He swears his life, his honor, and his silence to the brotherhood and its charge. The language would be archaic, solemn, weaving together the ideals of chivalric loyalty, monastic devotion, and philosophical pursuit. He vows to be a guardian of light in the darkness, a preserver of what is sacred and true, and to recognize his brothers only by the secret signs he is about to learn. With the oath spoken, the ritual reaches its climax, the symbolic death. The voice might declare that the man who entered this room no longer exists. A cloth could be draped over him, or a chalice of wine representing blood touched to his lips in a final communion with his former self. This is the negrido, the blackening, the dissolution of his old identity as a son of the world. Then the rebirth, the blindfold is finally removed. He blinks in the sudden, gentle light of a single candle or a lamp shaped like a radiant sun. Before him stand perhaps three hooded figures, their faces obscured, representing the wisdom of the past, the duty of the present, and the hope of the future. They welcome him not by his earthly name, but by a new one chosen for him, marking his new birth into the brotherhood. One of the elders then imparts the secret signs, the silent language of survival. This might be a specific handshake where the pressure of a certain finger against the wrist signifies recognition. It could be a way of casually touching a rose carved on a walking staff or a doorframe in passing. A coded phrase, seemingly innocent, like a comment on the weather, that carries a second, hidden meaning when spoken with a slight pause on a specific word. These are not childish games, but lifelines. In a world where an inquisitor could be anyone, these signs are the only way to know friend from foe, to ask for help or offer it without uttering a single compromising word. The psychological power of such a ceremony cannot be overstated. It is a controlled trauma, a deliberate shock to the system that forges an unbreakable bond. The disorientation, the solemn oath on a sacred object, the symbolic death and rebirth, these elements create a powerful memory etched not just in the mind but in the body. The candidate leaves that room fundamentally changed. He carries a secret self inside him, a hidden layer of identity that is more real to him than his public face. This duality, this constant, silent awareness of his true allegiance, is what binds him to every other member who has undergone the same trial. They are not just colleagues sharing an interest, they are fellow initiates who have stared into the same symbolic darkness and been reborn into the same fragile light. Their loyalty is not to a person, but to the ritual itself, to the transformative experience they now share, and to the profound, terrifying truth that experience represents. In a time of fear, they created a deeper fear, the fear of breaking a vow made in absolute darkness, and from that fear they spun a loyalty stronger than steel. Words are the most fragile and powerful of all tools. They can be copied, burned, or twisted by an enemy, which is why any true secret society would need more than coded manuscripts. They would need an entirely secret way of speaking, a living language known only to the initiated. The white rose, if it hoped to survive, would have required its own cant, a specialized argot that sounded like ordinary conversation to an outsider but carried a second, hidden meaning to a brother. This was not a fantasy, but a practical necessity with deep historical roots. For centuries, groups on the margins of society developed their own linguistic shields. In the teeming cities of medieval Europe, thieves and beggars used a thieves' cant, a slang of disguised meanings. A phrase like "the moon is full" might signal that a wealthy household was asleep, or to dance the hempen jig meant to be hanged. This language, called peddler's French or St. Giles Greek, was a survival mechanism, creating a barrier between the criminal underworld and the authorities. More relevant to our mystery were the traveling stonemasons. These master craftsmen, moving from cathedral site to cathedral site across Christendom, developed a rich jargon of their own. Their art of memory and mason word were not just technical terms for tools and geometries. They were verbal tokens of recognition, a way for a mason from Cologne to prove his skill and trustworthiness to a lodge in York. A man who knew the right words, the right responses to specific questions, was a brother in the craft, entitled to work and protection. If the White Rose drew members from these circles of mobile, knowledgeable men, it is almost certain they would have adopted and adapted this very concept, creating a private lexicon that turned everyday talk into a vehicle for hidden truth. This brings us to the tantalizing phrases that recur in texts and rumors associated with the order. These are not grand declarations, but odd, poetic fragments that feel out of place, like a strange melody woven into a familiar song. The first and most famous is the Latin phrase sub rosa, meaning under the rose. Historically, this phrase dates to antiquity, where a rose hung over a council table signified that all discussions were to remain confidential. By the Middle Ages, the symbol was carved into confessionals and private chambers. For the order, sub rosa could have been their ultimate governing principle, a constant reminder that their true work, their debates, and their very existence occurred in that sacred, silent space beneath the emblem of the rose. To speak of something being done sub rosa was to mark it as part of the secret work. Another recurring motif is the north wind. In medieval symbolism, the north wind was often considered cold, harsh, and dangerous, the direction from which darkness and winter came. In a coded lexicon, the north wind is rising could have been a dire warning that persecution was intensifying, that informants were near, or that a particular region had become too hazardous for brothers to gather. It was a weather report that had nothing to do with the weather. Then there is the more enigmatic phrase, the unbloomed garden. On the surface, it sounds like a description of a plot of land in early spring. But within a philosophical order dedicated to a white rose, the garden is the world, and the bloom is the realization of their secret truth, the achievement of their great work. An unbloomed garden would then be the current fallen state of society, still waiting for the transformative knowledge they guarded to take root and flower. A brother telling another that he tends an unbloomed garden might be confessing that his mission in a certain town was failing, that the people were not ready for the seeds he was trying to plant. Modern linguistic analysis could be the master key to this puzzle, but it is a painstaking art. Scholars would begin by building a corpus, gathering every scrap of text, every marginal note, every piece of correspondence, even vaguely linked to the legend. They would feed these into databases, not to search for explicit declarations, but for patterns. They would look for collocations, words that consistently appear together in unusual ways. Does the phrase white stone always appear near discussions of architecture? Does the sleeping king consistently correlate with passages about political theory? They would analyze semantic fields, mapping all the words used to describe concepts like knowledge, secrecy, or danger. If the texts use an unusually high number of horticultural metaphors for learning or maritime terms for safe travel, it could point to a deliberate, shared vocabulary. The most exciting possibility lies in stylometry, the statistical analysis of writing style. This technique can identify an author's linguistic fingerprint from their preferred sentence length to their use of common function words like the and. If multiple texts supposedly written by different people across different decades share the same deep stylistic signature, it could be evidence of a single guiding hand or a school of thought trained in the same rhetorical tradition. It would suggest that a white rose style existed, a way of writing and thinking that permeated their documents. The ultimate goal would be to crack not a cipher but a dialect. To move from seeing these phrases as beautiful oddities to understanding them as functional components of a lost language, the living breath of a brotherhood that chose to hide its heart not in a vault, but in the very air between its members, speaking in plain sight but heard only by the ears it was meant for. Every guardian of a secret must navigate a world full of hunters. For the White Rose, the medieval landscape was not merely a backdrop. It was a chessboard patrolled by powerful, relentless pieces, each with their own reasons to see the brotherhood erased from the board. Their survival depended on understanding not just one enemy, but an entire ecosystem of opposition, where the greatest threats often wore the robes of holy office. The most formidable of these was the Papal Inquisition, an institution born from a chilling clarity of purpose. Established in the 13th century, its mission was not to debate heresy, but to eradicate it with the cold precision of canon law. Operated primarily by the Dominican order, these inquisitors were not brutish thugs. They were theologians, lawyers, and logicians, trained to dissect a suspect's beliefs with surgical skill. To them, a secret society promoting personal spiritual knowledge or experimental science was not just wrong, it was an existential cancer on the body of Christendom. A Dominican inquisitor, like the formidable Bernard Gouy, author of a manual on detecting heresy, would have seen the White Rose's activities as a perfect storm of danger. Their secrecy proved their guilt, their interest in ancient philosophy showed pagan corruption, and their alleged possession of forbidden texts was evidence of a deliberate, prideful rebellion against divine authority. An interrogation would not seek to understand their ideals, but to dismantle their theology, force a recantation, and then hand them over to the secular authorities for the final, terrible punishment. The Inquisition was a machine designed to turn thought into evidence and silence into confession. Beyond this official arm of the Church stood rival power structures with more earthly concerns. Ambitious political factions at royal courts would view any clandestine network with deep suspicion. In the unstable world of medieval politics, knowledge was power, and a secret society with possible influence over nobles or access to hidden wealth was a potential rival or a tool to be controlled. A baron seeking to undermine a rival duke might happily feed rumors of heresy about the duke's mysterious philosophical advisor, using the Inquisition as a weapon in a purely secular feud. The order would have been caught in the crossfire of these intrigues, their philosophical purity meaningless to men playing for a crown. Even the world of secret societies was not a united front. Other clandestine groups operating with different goals could have been natural adversaries. Consider the legend of the Fidei Defensor, a hypothetical Orthodox Catholic secret brotherhood rumored to have been formed by hardliners within the Church to root out heresy from within, using the same shadowy methods as their enemies. A cell of the White Rose in Lyon and a cell of the Fidei Defensor in the same city might be locked in a silent, invisible war, each trying to unmask the other, neither able to appeal to the public authorities without revealing their own existence. This creates a dynamic landscape far richer than a simple duel between light and darkness. It was a multi-layer conflict, on the surface the public orthodoxy of kings and popes. Just beneath, the clandestine war between the White Rose and the Inquisition, and deeper still, the hidden struggles between secret societies themselves, a hall of mirrors where every reflection could be a friend or a foe. The order's daily reality was this constant, exhausting calculus of trust, a life spent listening for the doctrinal nuance in a stranger's conversation that might reveal a sympathetic mind or the subtle trap laid by an agent provocateur. Their greatest defense was not a sword, but a profound understanding of this entire ecosystem of belief and power, allowing them to move through it like a ghost, feeling the shifts in the political wind and the tightening grip of dogma long before the net began to close. The absence of a single, undeniable document is the very heart of this mystery. We must confront the great silence head-on, for the lack of proof is not a dead end, but a labyrinth of its own, each turn offering a different reason for the quiet. The first and most brutal possibility is systematic annihilation. The Inquisition was not just a persecutor, it was an archivist in reverse, dedicated to burning not only heretics but their words. Imagine a secret library, painstakingly assembled over generations, discovered in a raid. The trial records might briefly list its contents before consigning every parchment, every coded page, every unique thought to a cleansing fire. The proof of the order's existence would have been reduced to ash and smoke, leaving behind only the accusation in the trial transcript, a ghost of a library that once was. Their own survival strategy would have deepened this void. A policy of strict oral transmission where the core teachings were never written down but passed from master to initiate in whispered sessions means the most important truths lived and died with human breath. They became a living library, not a paper one, and when the last keeper died without a successor, the library simply vanished. Then there is the deliberate obscurity, the art of hiding in plain sight. If their communications were embedded in guild records, merchant ledgers, or the seemingly innocent margins of orthodox religious texts, we are not looking for a manifesto labeled Secret Order. We are looking for a pattern, a stylistic fingerprint, a recurring symbol in a sea of mundane documents. Without the key to that code, the evidence looks like noise. Time itself is an accomplice to this silence. Archives were lost to fire, flood, war, and simple neglect. A private collection in a nobleman's castle, dispersed and sold page by page after his line died out. A monastery's records eaten by damp or repurposed as binding for newer books. The medieval world was a precarious place for paper and parchment, and the passage of 8 centuries has erased far more than it has preserved. This leads us to the most nuanced possibility of all, that we are searching for the wrong thing. We imagine a formal institution with ranks, robes, and a sealed charter. But what if the White Rose was always something far more fluid, a persistent rumor of resistance, a name given by both its adherents and its enemies to a loose, ever-changing network of dissident minds? A Franciscan friar in Italy, a Cathar weaver in hiding in France, a university scholar in Oxford, and a stonemason in Germany might never meet, but through traveling merchants, wandering preachers, and exchanged manuscripts, their similar ideas could cross-pollinate, creating the impression of a coordinated brotherhood. In this light, the White Rose was not a secret society that vanished, but a spectrum of thought that periodically coalesced and then scattered. Its shape determined more by the pressure of persecution than by any central command. The silence, therefore, is not empty. It is filled with the echoes of all these possibilities, a chorus of historical forces explaining why a secret, once buried with such care, might remain forever just beyond our grasp. The true power of an idea lies in its ability to outlive the people who first whispered it. While the medieval order may have dissolved into the mists of history, the philosophical currents it represented refused to be contained. We can trace a ghostly lineage, not of a secret society passing a torch in the dark, but of a recurring human impulse toward intellectual and spiritual freedom, a lineage for which the White Rose serves as a potent early symbol. This legacy begins to crystallize in the Renaissance. Think of figures like Pico della Mirandola, a 15th century scholar who boldly argued for the dignity of man and the synthesis of all wisdom from Plato to the Kabbalah. Or Erasmus of Rotterdam, who used his brilliant satire to critique the corruptions of the Church while championing a return to the original, simpler teachings of Christ. These humanists did not cite a secret order, but they embodied its rumored ideals, placing human reason and direct engagement with ancient texts at the center of their quest, challenging the monolithic authority of medieval scholasticism. They were not members, but they were heirs to a similar spirit of inquiry. This spirit ignited the fires of the scientific revolution. A century later, Galileo Galilei pointed his telescope at the heavens and saw evidence that contradicted the accepted cosmic order. His crime was not heresy in a purely spiritual sense, but a heresy of observation, insisting that the book of nature was written in the language of mathematics and must be read directly, even if its pages seem to contradict the official interpretation of Scripture. He stood for empirical evidence over received dogma, a principle any guardian of forbidden natural philosophy would have understood intimately. So too did Sir Isaac Newton, who spent as much time deciphering alchemical texts and biblical prophecy as he did formulating the laws of motion. For Newton, the universe was a divine cryptogram, and unlocking its secrets was a sacred, if perilous, duty. These pioneers operated in a new, more public arena, but the core tension remained the same: the struggle to reconcile observed truth with institutional orthodoxy. By the 18th century, this thread of dissent wove itself into the fabric of the Enlightenment. Philosophers like Voltaire and Denis Diderot made the critique of authority their life's work, championing reason, tolerance, and freedom of thought as the foundations of a just society. Diderot's monumental encyclopedia was itself an act of radical preservation and dissemination, aiming to collect all human knowledge and make it accessible, breaking the monopoly held by church and state. This was the White Rose's alleged mission, scaled up and shouted from the rooftops. The secret was no longer a guarded treasure, but a public right. The Enlightenment thinkers secularized the quest, removing the layer of mystical symbolism, but the underlying drive to challenge power and empower the individual mind was a direct philosophical descendant. This lineage extends into our own time, in the ongoing struggle for freedom of conscience and expression. Every scientist who pursues an unpopular line of research, every writer who challenges a prevailing ideology, every individual who insists on the right to question and explore for themselves, walks a path that was once trodden in terrified secrecy. The modern advocate for open inquiry may not carve roses in stone, but they honor the same fundamental principle, that knowledge belongs to humanity, not to any gatekeeper. So, did the secret order of the White Rose directly cause the Renaissance or the Enlightenment? No, that is not how ideas work, but the persistent legend of such a brotherhood gives a name and a shape to a timeless human yearning. It provides a symbolic origin story for the eternal rebel, the quiet guardian of unwelcome truths. In the end, their greatest legacy may be the simple, haunting question they left echoing through the centuries. A question that every generation must answer for itself. How much are you willing to risk for the light of understanding, and how deep will you go to protect it from the dark? The silence of the archives is no longer absolute. Today, the hunt for the White Rose has moved from dusty libraries into the luminous glow of the digital realm, where new tools are giving old secrets a second chance to speak. This is not a replacement for scholarship, but a powerful augmentation, a technological lens placed over the medieval world. The first breakthrough came with the mass digitization of manuscripts. Institutions like the Vatican Library and the British Museum have undertaken monumental projects to scan their collections in ultra-high resolution. A researcher in Tokyo can now zoom into the marginalia of a 13th century bestiary from Oxford, examining the stroke of a quill with a clarity impossible under the gentle light of a reading room. This global, open access has democratized the search, turning every curious mind with an internet connection into a potential sleuth. But the real magic begins when we look beyond what the human eye can see. Spectral imaging, a technique developed for space exploration and medical diagnostics, is now being applied to fragile parchment. By capturing images at specific wavelengths of light from ultraviolet to infrared, this technology can peer beneath the surface. It reveals erasures, palimpsests where a later monk scraped away an older, heretical text to reuse the expensive vellum, only for the original ink, bonded to the collagen in the skin, to linger invisibly beneath. A seemingly blank margin under infrared light might blossom with a hastily scrawled diagram of celestial orbits or the faint, ghostly outline of a rose. These are the lost whispers recovered not by breaking a code but by bending light itself. The sheer volume of this data, however, is overwhelming. This is where artificial intelligence enters the scriptorium. Researchers are training machine learning algorithms to recognize patterns no single scholar could ever hold in memory. An AI can be fed thousands of images of known symbols, from common heraldic badges to alchemical sigils. It then scans millions of digitized manuscript pages, flagging every instance of a white rose, a radiant sun, or a specific geometric shape with inhuman speed and consistency. More subtly, it can analyze handwriting styles, searching for the unique linguistic fingerprint we discussed, identifying texts that share a common, hidden authorial voice across different libraries and centuries. The AI does not interpret, it alerts, creating a map of potential connections for the human historian to then explore. This digital hunt has become a collective endeavor. Online platforms now host crowdsourced deciphering projects where volunteers from around the world can log in and examine scanned fragments. You might be presented with a page from a baffling cipher, like a section of the Voynich manuscript, and asked to transcribe strange characters or look for repeating patterns. Another project might ask you to tag images in medieval artwork, helping to build a database of how often and in what context specific symbols appear. In this way, the search for the white rose is no longer confined to academia. It has become a vast collaborative puzzle, a global guild of digital detectives sifting through the pixels of the past. The bridge between eras is profound. A medieval scribe hunched over his desk by candlelight used the most advanced technology of his age, a finely cut quill and carefully mixed ink to hide a truth. Today, we use particle accelerators and neural networks to find it. We are not just looking for a secret society, we are engaging in a conversation across time, using the language of science to answer questions posed in the language of symbol and shadow. The next clue may not be found in a hidden vault, but in a dataset waiting for the right algorithm or the right pair of eyes to recognize a pattern that has been sleeping in plain sight for 800 years. Perhaps the deepest secret is not what they guarded, but why we cannot stop searching for them. This legend endures because it speaks to something fundamental in the human spirit, a longing that facts alone can never satisfy. At its core, we are a species of puzzle solvers, our brains wired to find patterns and meaning in the chaos of the world. The white rose mystery is the ultimate historical jigsaw, with most of the pieces missing, inviting us to fill the empty spaces with our own imagination. It is a cognitive itch we are compelled to scratch, a story that remains perpetually unfinished and therefore perpetually alive. There is a profound romance to the idea of a hidden history, a truth that exists just beneath the surface of the textbooks. It suggests that the past is not a dead, settled thing, but a living narrative with secrets still waiting to be uncovered. This romanticism transforms dusty archives and weathered stones into artifacts of a grand, silent war, making history feel personal and urgent. We are not passive observers, we become detectives on a trail that stretches across centuries. This connects to a powerful desire to believe in guardians, in noble figures who stood against the tide of ignorance or corruption to protect a precious truth. In a world that often feels chaotic and cynical, the idea of the white rose offers a narrative of quiet integrity. It proposes that even in the darkest ages, there were individuals who valued knowledge and conscience above power or safety, who formed a chain of custody for wisdom that the world was not ready to receive. They become the intellectual equivalent of a fairy tale knight, not rescuing a princess but safeguarding the very light of reason itself. This fills a specific emotional and narrative gap. Official history is written by the victors, the kings and popes, leaving vast silences about the losers, the dissidents, and the quiet thinkers. The human mind abhors a vacuum, and a mystery like this provides a beautifully structured story to inhabit those empty spaces. It gives a name, a symbol, and a purpose to the anonymous resistance we sense must have existed, weaving the scattered threads of real persecution and real intellectual courage into a single, elegant tapestry. We can see this same enduring allure in other great mysteries. The lost city of Atlantis taps into our fascination with a fallen, advanced civilization and a warning from the deep past. The Knights Templar legend merges sudden wealth, dramatic downfall, and rumors of hidden relics into a potent cocktail of conspiracy. But the White Rose possesses a unique flavor that sets it apart. Unlike Atlantis, it is not a cataclysmic geological event, but a slow, intellectual burn. Unlike the Templars, it is not about military monks and public trials, but about scholars and silent scribes. Its domain is not the battlefield or the ocean floor, but the library, the cloister, and the human mind. Its weapon is not the sword, but the idea. This gives the mystery a particular intimacy and subtlety. It is a whisper in a cathedral, a symbol carved where few would look, a philosophy passed hand to hand in the dead of night. It appeals not to our thirst for spectacle, but to our yearning for meaning, for the sense that in every age, a few brave souls understood that the most powerful revolutions begin not with a shout, but with a carefully guarded secret waiting for its time to bloom. The legend of the White Rose is a story that begins with a single, silent symbol and ends in the vast, echoing chamber of our own imagination. We have followed its faint trail from the margins of monastic chronicles to the soaring vaults of Gothic cathedrals, from the whispered oaths of a hidden initiation to the digital glow of a modern computer screen searching for its ghost. We have met possible members in the defiant scholar Roger Bacon and the powerful patron Elena of Aquitaine, and we have seen their emblem co-opted by kings and reimagined by novelists. The journey reveals a truth more compelling than any single historical fact. Whether the order was a formal brotherhood, a loose network of dissent, or a phantom conjured by later ages, its persistent legend illuminates a medieval world far more complex than the old tales of simple faith and blind feudalism. It was an era of profound questioning, of intellectual daring conducted in the shadows, where the thirst for knowledge, spiritual, scientific, or political, could be as dangerous as any sword and just as powerful. This hidden history of doubt and discovery is the White Rose's most valuable legacy. It reminds us that even in an age of absolute authority, the human mind never stopped seeking its own light. So we are left with a final, provocative choice. The historical truth of the secret order of the White Rose may be forever lost to the fires of the Inquisition and the erosion of time. But the search for it continues, a modern fellowship of historians, codebreakers, and the curious, all drawn to the same enigmatic symbol. Which, then, is the more meaningful secret? Do you believe a real brotherhood of the Rose once walked in the shadows, guarding a truth that died with them? Or is the search itself, this timeless, collective act of questioning and piecing together fragments, the real, living order we have all joined? Share your theories in the comments below, and if you are captivated by mysteries that whisper from the depths of history, subscribe for more journeys into the